The trouble with retirement is that you never get a day off. Abe Lemons. Welcome to RetireMentorship, your mentor to and through retirement. I'm your host, Freeman Lindy, Certified Financial Planner. Today we're looking at Step 5 of the financial planning process, retirement planning. There's two parts of this. Part 1 is pre-retirement planning, how to plan leading up to retirement. And Part 2 is in retirement planning, how to be retired and what we do inside of retirement. That's coming up on the RetireMentorship podcast. First, the 2-minute tune-in, the primary points of the podcast in about 2 minutes. There are 3 main aspects of in retirement planning. Number 1, retirement income. Many of us live for so long always saving for retirement and accumulating money in it, living off of an income. And that won't change once we retire. Yes, we might have a big pile of cash and investments, but we need to turn that into an income so that we don't spend it down too fast and can pay our monthly and annual bills. But how we turn that into an income eminently matters. We need a retirement income that we cannot outlive, that will grow faster than the cost of living, and that can roll with the punches. The next big piece is Social Security. Once we make a decision on Social Security, you cannot undo that. And knowing how Social Security fits into your overall financial plan is a key part of the in-retirement process. And lastly, Medicare, the health insurance component of retirement. There are many options to Medicare, and looking at it in a vacuum may produce different results than in a plan. You will want to plan for how to take Social Security and Medicare as it fits and relates to the rest of your retirement plan. That's all coming up on the RetireMentorship podcast. Creating a financial plan, Step 5, Part 2, in retirement planning. So much of our lives is spent planning for retirement, saving up money into different retirement accounts and investing with retirement in mind. But at some point, we will get to retirement. And it's crucial to have a plan for what we're going to do in retirement before we get to retirement. Effective in retirement planning starts 5 to 10 years out from retirement. A good football coach does not wait until after kickoff in order to come up with a game plan for the game. Instead, days or even weeks before, they come up with a plan for what they're going to do once the game begins. Yes, they'll have to call audibles and make changes to the plan in the middle of the game, but you certainly would not want to wait until after kickoff to start planning for it. In the same way, effective in retirement planning starts long before we're retired. We may look at it even a little bit leading up to retirement more than 10 years out, but once you hit that 10-year mark, you really want to start focusing on it. If you're less than 5 years out from retirement and you don't have an in-retirement plan yet, then you absolutely need to get one today. You should have started at least 5 years before retirement and preferably 10. What are we talking about when we discuss in-retirement planning? In-retirement planning consists of 3 major components: retirement income, Social Security, and Medicare. Let's look at each one. Retirement income. We've discussed this before on previous episodes of the podcast, but when it comes to retirement income, you want 3-dimensional retirement income. You want a retirement income that does 3 things. The 3 dimensions. Duration, having an income you cannot outlive. Direction, having an income that goes in the correct direction in retirement, namely up. And deviation, having an income that can flex with the changes that will come in retirement. No one wants to run out of money. No one wants to live on a fixed income as the cost of everything you need and want to buy increase on you. And no one wants to be stuck with something when, not if, life changes on them. That's why you want a 3-dimensional retirement income. Right off the bat, this all but eliminates annuities as a solution for retirement income. The vast majority of annuities will give you a fixed income. You'll take a sum of money and put it into a product, and they will guarantee that it will pay a set amount each month or year for the rest of your life as long as you live. That sounds great. That sounds just what we wanted, a retirement income we cannot outlive. No matter how long you live, it will always pay out to you. It matches the duration component of three-dimensional retirement income. And this is where a lot of seminars and webinars and emphasis is placed on retirement planning in getting annuities. But here's the problem with most annuities. They lack the second component, direction. They are fixed income. You're exchanging a sum of money for a certain amount each month, and that will remain the same for as long as you live. In the meantime, the cost of everything that you want and need to buy is going to keep increasing. Yes, that guaranteed income looks great when a box of Cheerios costs $4, but will it still be as great when a box of Cheerios is $6 or $8 or $11 for one box? We need real income growth. We need our income that will keep pace or exceed the rising cost of living. This doesn't happen accidentally, and it certainly does not happen with a lot of the default options that are out there. You need a plan for your retirement income, not simply to wing it. And here's one more distinction we want to make. When going for retirement income, you should focus on the total return of your retirement investments, not the income component. Many people believe, and there's a conventional quote-unquote wisdom that says you should convert over into income-bearing securities when you enter retirement. That you should swap out of appreciating stock and equity mutual funds and instead switch over to income-producing bonds. Fixed income, as it's known, that kicks off a percentage of its value in interest and income. The thought goes that you add a whole bunch of interest-bearing investments to your portfolio and you live off the interest. Thus, way too much time and energy is spent on looking at bond yields and the various income of different bond funds. But that can't possibly matter. What matters is the total return, the appreciation of the value, plus any dividends in the case of equities or interest in the case of bonds. We need our total return of our investment portfolio to exceed that of inflation and preferably our withdrawals as well. The plan is that your portfolio would grow faster than inflation and your withdrawals, so that your portfolio grows even as we continue to take a larger and larger income off of it. In this way, you will always be living off of the total return growth, not digging into the principal at all. And in this way, never having to worry about running out of money. We talked about it a bit last week when you're looking at the total return of your portfolio versus your withdrawals. If you assume that inflation is 2% and your total portfolio return may only make 5%, you can only withdraw 3% of your portfolio in order to never run out of money. If you withdraw more than that, you are now dipping into principal because you're withdrawing money faster than your account can grow when it comes to inflation. And once you start digging into principal, it is only a matter of time before you run out. Your enemy then becomes the clock, and living too long will cause you to run out of money. This is not a secure or safe way to be retired. Far too many people focus on the volatility of equities and say that equities in retirement are not safe, that you should be in safe fixed income, in bonds and CDs and cash. Those are the safe vehicles in retirement. You don't want to quote-unquote lose your money, therefore you should be in fixed income. But it is not safe at all to have an income that cannot keep up with inflation, so that as time goes, you can afford less and less of all the items you need and want to buy. It does not matter if your portfolio had minimal volatility if you run out of money 10 years before you die. We should be focusing on total return, not income, over long periods of time. Your long term doesn't end when you retire. You still have 2 to 3 decades left of life. And if you're a multi-generational investor, which we should all be, then you have the lives of your children and grandchildren as well. Unless you plan on spending all your money in the first few years of retirement, you will need long-term investments in your retirement income. And it turns out long-term investments, namely equities, are the best long-term way to beat out inflation and have an income that grows faster than the cost of living. As we look at 30-year returns ending in 2019, Equities averaged 10%, bonds averaged 6%, and inflation was 2.4%. Looked another way, bonds did 2.5 times that of inflation, and equities did 4 times what inflation did. They are the best long-term hedge against inflation and the rising cost of living. If you want to be secure against inflation and have an income that grows faster, goes in the direction you want it to go, and lasts the duration of your retirement, then you must have equities in your retirement. Hence the obligatory disclaimer, this is not investment advice. We're talking about planning, how to create a plan around retirement. And you should have an investing plan that you created yourself because you have the competence, the capacity, the commitment, contentment, and character to build it yourself, or because you hired someone else who possesses these 5 C's to do it for you. See episode 24 if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about. So even though we will be talking about equities and fixed income, this is not investment advice for you, and certainly don't go out and convert a bunch of your retirement funds into equity based on a podcast episode. This is too important for you to not fully understand it and have a full plan that you're following. That's aside, as we look at your retirement income and the investment portfolio that you will need in retirement, not leading up to it, but in retirement itself, here are some things you should consider. Equities over the long term have done 4 times that of inflation, giving you the best chance of satisfying the durational and directional requirements of your retirement income. We must also consider, though, sequence of return risk. That is, that if you have a big downturn early on in your retirement, it may permanently destroy or disable your retirement mix. We know we will have downturns. We know we will have significant recessions or bear markets during your retirement. It averages 1 every 5 years and a large one every 10 years, meaning that you will go from 2 to 3 large bear markets in your retirement and many more smaller ones. It's not a question of if you have big letdowns in your equity investments, but when. And if you have those big downturns early on in your retirement, as opposed to a few years in, and you need to sell your equities when they're down, they may not recover. Consider this. If you lose 50% of the value of your equities, how much does it need to grow in order to come back to even? It's not 50%. If you go from $1 million down to 500,000, how much growth do you need for that 500,000 to get back to $1 million? 50% growth on 500,000 would only get you to 750,000. You need 100% growth to get back. A 40% drop needs a 67% growth to get back to even. The very worst thing you can do is have all of your money in equities and retirement, have a large drop right away, and have to be pulling money out when it's down. You will turn a 40% drop into a 50% reduction in your personal portfolio. And you will need to be withdrawing as your portfolio recovers, which will limit and hamper that recovery, and you won't get back to where you need it to be. So while equities have the best long-term solution for inflation and are an amazing tool for accumulation and distribution, you cannot have 100% equities in retirement. That would be foolish. Here's how we teach retirement income. Red bucket, blue bucket. Think of equities as fire. Fire rages up and down. It's hot, it's red. There will be lots of volatility in your equity investments. It'll go up and down, but up overall over time. Your fixed income is blue money. It's a blue bucket. Think of it like water. It will ripple and fluctuate a little bit, but nothing like fire. Red bucket is best for growth over the long term, and blue bucket adds some stability over the short term. You want some in each. You need a red and a blue bucket in retirement. What you don't want is a purple bucket, and we'll explain why in a moment. At retirement, you will want 2 to 4 years of expenses in blue bucket, in cash and bond. It's not a percentage amount. It's not a percent in red bucket and a percent in blue. 60% equities, 40% fixed income. None of that. It's years. If you follow the steps from pre-retirement planning, then you should have identified the income that you want in retirement. And you should know the gross amount you would need to withdraw each year in order to satisfy that income requirement. We will take that number and take 2 to 4 times that amount and set it aside in Blue Bucket, preferably in a separate account or accounts with cash and bonds in them. This is our war chest, our emergency reserve. We will pull from this blue bucket of money when our equities are down. The rest will go into equities, all of it. These funds will grow with plenty of volatility over the years and decades of our retirement, producing a total return far in excess of inflation and our withdrawals, as long as our withdrawals are reasonable. When, not if, our equities go down in value temporarily, and I'm not talking about the run-of-the-mill 10 or 15% drop, but rather a 20 to 30 to even 40% drop in value, we will want something else to pull our income from. We do not sell equities when they are down. We buy low and sell high, not on a monthly or yearly standpoint, but over the course of our entire investing career. Meaning that in retirement, when we are selling to produce income, we never sell low. We only sell high. On average, 4 to 5 years, equities are up. And in these years, we will sell our equities. We'll sell out of our red bucket to produce the income that we need to live on. And in the down years, 1 out of 5 on average, we will not want to sell equities because they will be down. Instead, we will take our income from our blue bucket. We will let our red bucket recover, let the temporary decline in the values erase itself, and continue to pull out of red bucket after it has recovered. 2 years of expenses in blue bucket will cover almost all of your downturns. If you want to be especially cautious and be able to survive something like the global financial crisis of 2008, then you'd want closer to 4 years of expenses in cash and bonds. If you look at the Great Depression and the Great Recession, it appears as though we only have one of these every 80 or so years, but it could certainly happen again sooner than that. Those who want to live on the edge would be closer to 2 years of expenses in blue bucket, and those who want to play it more safe should be okay with 4. If you had had 4 years of expenses in a blue bucket and you were retired during the global financial crisis, you would have been just fine. By the time you stopped pulling money out of your red bucket and had completely exhausted your blue bucket, the red bucket would have been almost entirely back to where it was pre-crisis. Thus, your portfolio mix of red and blue bucket of equities and fixed income is not about percentages, but rather about years of income. We live on income, not percentages. Have a planned number of years you want in blue and throw the rest in red. Of course, following an exact investing plan for both. Historically, anytime we've had deep recession years, they've always been followed by rapid ascent back and exceeding previous highs. So if you spend 2 years, say, of the 4 years of your blue bucket before your red bucket returns, you can even pull more out of your red bucket after it is fully recovered and reaching new heights to replenish your blue bucket back to the full 4 years of expenses. No one knows when the next downturns will happen or when the recessions will happen in your retirement. But in this way, you can be planned for both. With the bulk of your retirement funds and equities, they will significantly outperform inflation if history rhymes. Thus, you will have a retirement income that goes in the direction you need it to go. If you have reasonable withdrawals, then the total growth of your portfolio will exceed not only inflation, but also your withdrawals, and thus you will have an income that lasts the duration of your retirement. You will never dip into principal because you will be living off the total growth. And if you have a blue bucket and a red bucket, you have the deviation. No matter what the market is doing, whether it's up or down or sideways, you have a bucket of money to draw from and to match the changes in the overall market. It may sound simple, and in some ways it is, but it is certainly not easy. It is one thing to see your retirement portfolio go down 30% when you are 20 years out from retirement. It is another thing entirely to see 80% plus of your retirement funds go down by 40% when you're in retirement, and that is the money you need to live on. To try to attempt something like this alone is, in my opinion, foolish. You should have a behavioral financial planner along with you to embark on this to ensure you don't make the gravest of all mistakes: panicking and selling your portfolio when it's down. If you have 2 to 4 years of expenses in Blue Bucket, it'll work out to somewhere between 95 and 80% of your money in equities, with the remainders being in fixed income. This is a much higher allocation to equities than the more traditional models of 60%, 50%, or even 40% equities, with the rest in fixed income. You will be going through a lot more volatility, and the emotional roller coaster that can bring, especially doing it alone, is more than almost anyone can bear. But the extra growth will certainly make it worth it to hire someone along the way to keep you on the straight and narrow and keep you from making fatal mistakes. Historically, this will have always worked, and we believe that history, if it doesn't repeat itself, at least will rhyme, and it will continue to work in the future. It is certainly better than the alternative of having all your money in bonds that are producing 1%, or sticking in an annuity which gives you a guaranteed income, which is essentially decreasing in real purchasing power over your lifetime. You will have to face some emotional discomfort on one side of retirement or the other. Either face it on the early side with some volatility, or face it on the later side with running out of money. I would rather have plan A. You will also want to plan, if you're not yet in retirement, of how to wind down to the proper amount of equities and fixed income. Again, this is not investment advice, but my clients are generally 100% equities all the way up to about 5 or so years from retirement. From there, you will want to make a plan to fill up your blue bucket, your fixed income bucket, to the right amount before you get to retirement. No one can guarantee that the stock market will work, but we can believe that it will work, as it always has. And all the guarantees that other people are selling come at a cost. What's more, all those guarantees do not work if the general stock market does not work. That insurance company that is guaranteeing you a fixed income for the rest of your life will not be able to pay that fixed income if it goes down with every other company to zero. Either the whole thing works or nothing works. It always has worked in the past. The resilience of American companies and other great companies around the world have always pulled through, and we believe it will in the future. But you will need someone alongside of you to remind you of that in the darkest days that you will face. To plan your retirement, you need a plan for your retirement income. And if this makes sense to you, it is worth putting this into a plan and finding someone to help you follow it. The next piece of in-retirement planning is Social Security. We're not going to go into the details of Social Security. You either know it or perhaps we'll cover it on a future episode. What we do want to do is talk about how you plan for Social Security in an overall financial plan. One of the critical mistakes that I see many people making when it comes to Social Security is that they calculate it in a vacuum. They Google Social Security calculator and they find a nifty calculator with lots of good visuals that can help them calculate how to maximize, quote unquote, their Social Security. It will show them based on their income and their age and their life expectancy at what age to take Social Security in order to maximize, to get the greatest total amount of Social Security possible. This is wrong. Social Security is not taken in a vacuum. It is taken along with every other piece of your financial plan. Yes, a Social Security calculator can tell you how to get the most amount of your Social Security if you're looking at Social Security alone. What it can't tell you is how to get the most amount of your total money altogether. For example, it might say, hey, you should delay taking Social Security until 70. Because your life expectancy is 95 and taking it at 70 will give you a total amount of Social Security greater between 70 and 95 than it would if you took it at 67 or 62 or any other age. Okay, great. But what about the rest of your retirement? If you are, for example, retiring at 65, but you're delaying taking Social Security until 70, that's 5 years when you need to heavily withdraw from your investment portfolio in order to make up that income while you wait to take Social Security. That might be a good move if almost all of your investments are in bonds and CDs and you wouldn't have much growth anyways. But if you think about it, if you're taking out a bunch of your investments out of your equities in the first 5 years of retirement and you're planning to live another 25 years after that, you are now withdrawing much of your investments before it has 2 to 2.5 decades to grow. And you are seriously hamstringing your long-term growth of your retirement portfolio. Thus, your Social Security plan depends heavily on your investing plan. How is it invested and what are you expecting to get out of your other investments matters tremendously when it comes to picking your Social Security. You may want to start Social Security as early as possible to minimize the amount you need to withdraw from your retirement portfolio and thus give more of it the longest amount of time to grow. Yes, you may get less out of Social Security itself, but you will get more out of your overall financial plan. There are also a number of joint considerations you need to make. While it's more complicated than this, the basic version is that if you are married, the survivor of the first to die will essentially get the greater of the two Social Security streams. So if she had a higher income over her lifetime and her Social Security amount is greater than his, but she passes first, he will get her retirement stream, not his. But you will lose one. So you'll want to determine your Social Security also based on the individual life expectancies you have, if one is much healthier or unhealthier than the other, as well as the actual income itself. If one is much larger, we may want to let it get even bigger so that when we lose one, we lose a very small Social Security stream of income relative to the other one, and it's not a massive hit. If they're both equal when we take them, then when we lose one, we lose 50% of our income. But if one of the streams is twice the size of the other, then when we lose one, we only lose 1/3 of our income from Social Security, not half. And so we'll want to consider all the joint considerations of Social Security as well as our investing plan when we take it. We may also take it depending on the current market cycle. If the market is raging up and continues to do so, and we decide we want to continue to pull money out to sell high in the stock market, we may delay taking Social Security from when we originally planned to. We might wait for the next recession, and then once that happens, then we kick in Social Security so that we can take less out of our portfolio while it's down and wait for it to recover before continuing to withdraw. Once you choose your Social Security start date, you cannot change it. So we want to be right on this before we begin to withdraw. Do not calculate this in a vacuum. You'll want to consider your investing plan, joint considerations if you're married, and the market cycle you are currently in before you take it. In your retirement planning, you will want to create a tentative plan for when to take Social Security and have the factors in mind that would change that date when you get to it. Perhaps you take it a little sooner or a little later than you originally intended, but that will want to be a proactive move, not merely a reactive move. You'll want to have the various options you could take in mind before you take them. Pensions are very similar if you have a pension. Oftentimes there are joint considerations, market timing considerations, and of course it will, like Social Security, be dependent on your investing plan. Considerations for pensions are almost the same as Social Security and of course depend on the various rules and options of your pension. The last element of in retirement planning is Medicare, when to take that. Many of us will have had group health insurance for our working lives, and when we retire, Medicare is the option for the vast majority of Americans. Part A is free at age 65, as long as you qualify, which most people do. It covers hospitalizations. Part B is for care and preventative. It's your basic insurances. This is a flat rate that is charged and is adjusted annually based on the cost of living. And also you may have a surcharge if you make a higher income in retirement. Part D is for prescription drugs, and we'll cover that, which is not covered at all by Part A or Part B. And if you delay taking Part D when you initially start, maybe you don't have any prescription drugs then, but you need it later, it will be a huge penalty for delaying. Same goes with Part B. Part C is also called Medicare Advantage, and these are plans from private insurers that mimic Part A and B, have the same rules, but also may add additional pieces as well. All the considerations of Medicare are beyond the scope of this episode, but when it comes to planning it in our overall financial plan and retirement plan, here's a few things you want to consider. There is no out-of-pocket max on Part A and B. If you have a massive health cost, you can still end up paying a massive amount. Therefore, I don't like option A and B alone or with D without some kind of max out of pocket on top of it. This will entirely depend on where you are and the different options available to you in your area, but often we would consider adding a Part C instead, which will of course cover Part A and B and often D, but will add a max out of pocket. That way we will know not only what our monthly costs for premiums are, but also our max total cost for years when we have major expenses. A lot of the considerations for Medicare then are similar to those that we covered in the insurance planning episode around health insurance and finding the lowest total cost for our health care, not just our health insurance. One thing to also note here is that I generally avoid Medicare supplements. This is confusing for a lot of people because Medicare Advantage has lots of different plan options, and Medicare supplements have similarly named plans. So people often confuse Medicare supplements with Medicare Advantage. Most of what medical supplements try to do is to levelize the cost of your health insurance. They say, yes, maybe you have a max out of pocket, but do you really want to spend $10,000 in 1 year? Instead, pay X amount per month and we will cover your max out of pocket for you, and lots of other various combinations. These are all built by private insurance companies and are all very profitable for those companies, which generally means it's not profitable for the end user. If you've built your retirement income to have some deviation, to be able to flex a little bit, and are intent about your total healthcare cost, meaning that you're spending money to stay healthy, not just spending money to try to recover when you have a health emergency, then you can handle a year or two of max out of pockets. It won't matter if you need to fork over $10,000 in 1 year if you're saving $4,000 a year in Medicare supplements and don't need to hit your max that often. Again, we go back to the importance of a proper retirement income plan. If you are on a fixed income of just Social Security and annuity streams, then perhaps you can't afford a max out of pocket. You've pushed yourself into a fixed income bracket and you may need to levelize your healthcare costs because you can't afford anything else. This is the ultimate importance of that third dimension of retirement income, deviation, being able to roll with the punches. We'll do future episodes on Social Security and Medicare individually to provide more details, but these are the ways you would want to think about them in your overall financial plan and your retirement planning and the things that you will need to plan for before you get to retirement, not after. You must start your in-retirement planning if you are 10 years or less away from retirement. If all this sounds complicated, it's because it is. A good plan, though, will take all that complexity and generate a simple way forward. Simple, again, does not mean easy, but we can simplify all this complexity in a way that makes sense for you and your specific situation. This does get somewhat difficult to explain over audio only, which is why we're happy to announce that we will be doing a virtual seminar on the topic of retirement planning in September 2021. If you are 50 years old or older, you will want to register to join the Principal Problem virtual seminar. We will go into how to create a retirement income that you cannot outlive. some of the messaging from today, along with greater visuals and explanations in ways that make more sense when you can see it and not just hear it. We want to give you lots of options for this, so the seminar will be held 4 different times to give you flexibility to make sure you can make one. It's on September 14th or 16th at noon or 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. So there's 4 different options depending on what you have going on in your life. You should be able to make one of those work. We're happy to have you do it while you're eating lunch or dinner. It's why it's scheduled at those times. And again, it's a webinar format, so you will not be seen. There's no video on you. You'll just get to watch. This is also not one of those boring webinars where someone with a dumb webcam is sitting up there with a PowerPoint and monotone, but rather an engaging presentation with some interactive visuals and a Q&A at the end to allow you to ask questions, which we will answer. Couples are welcome. If you're married, we invite you to both attend it so you can be on the same page and start planning, or at least understanding what goes into planning your retirement. If you're not over 50, but you have parents that are over 50 and are not yet retired or just barely retired, this will be a must-watch for them. So feel free to invite them. We'll have a mini trailer coming out a little bit later this week on it that you can share with them, about 2 minutes on the seminar, and we'll have a video that'll come out as well that you can send people. Register using the link in the show notes, or you can go to principalproblem.com and that will link you over to the registration page for the seminar. Name and email is all it takes, and that's just so you can get the link to the webinar, and we're excited to see you there. Next week, we will look at the final step in creating a financial plan, estate planning, how to make sure that all of your money and hard-earned wealth goes to whom you want it, without the government deciding, without attorneys getting their grubby hands on it, and that will be a critical one as well. After that, we will look at how do we put all of these things together in a 1-page plan that is easy to follow and stick with, and then finally, how to find help with creating a financial plan. If all this seems overwhelming and you want some help with it, we'll go into how to find that help and get the right people on your side. That's it for today. We'll see you on Friday with some action items from this week. Have a great week. This podcast is educational only and is not intended to be investment, legal, or tax advice or recommendations, whether direct or incidental. Again, this is not investment advice. Consult your financial, tax, and legal professionals for specific advice related to your specific situation. Never take investment advice from someone who doesn't know you and your specific situation. All opinions expressed in this podcast are the opinions of the speakers expressing them. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. RetireMentorship is not affiliated with or controlled by any registered investment advisor, broker-dealer, or other financial services company.